What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you my review after 100% for Bloomtown, A Different Story. A jrpg that released last year, kind of giving you an adventure through 1960s Americana that, having played a little bit via a demo back then, I knew I wanted to eventually get around to reviewing, which is obviously what we're doing here now, so much later than I probably initially intended at least. But nonetheless, to get my usual stuff out of the way, I review games after 100% all the time to set me apart from other reviewers on the platform, and while that does include the achievements, it also includes a lot more than that. There's a link below covering everything I go over, and my Steam profile is public and linked below as well. Though, in the case of Bloomtown, A Different Story, worth a quick mention. Obviously, I did not get a review key for this, paid for this one. I believe I bought it during the 2024 Steam Winter Sale for I think it was like $10 because I knew I was eventually planning to play it. Now, in terms of achievements and things, Bloomtown is an easy game to 100%. It's relatively short in terms of your initial playthrough, which is likely going to be around the 20-ish hour mark. The only thing you really have to watch out for is that this game does have some missable content, primarily in the form of a few side quests that are easily missed, alongside you potentially giving yourself not enough time to unlock 10 chests, as the counter for that seemed to be pretty tight with lockpicks in particular. There's just not a lot of those chests to unlock, So whether or not you wind up being able to get this done in 1 or 2 runs is largely up to you. Otherwise, though, let's actually go ahead and talk about what this game is. Basically, we are a few kids who get stuck at their grandfather's for summer break following the divorce of their parents, it would seem. And you're going to spend that summer fighting demons which are seemingly responsible for the abduction of a lot of children in this town, which is like a weird combination of something like Persona and Stranger Things in the end, with the upside of there not actually being any timers. While days and things are passing, there's no limit to how many days can pass. Really, the only sort of limiting factor there is that some things are only available on certain days of the week, but you can just cycle through the days until you get there. So it's an interesting blend of mechanics that winds up being very approachable thanks to its relatively compact size and price. Moving on a little bit, though, we then have the technical side of things. Straight up, I just didn't have any problems running this game at all. Like, nothing was legitimately a problem as I moved through this. But I will say in this section that for whatever reason, there's like a good 2 or 3 hour stretch at the beginning of the game where you're just not allowed to manually save, which can be annoying. And the game does auto-save during this, so it's not like the end of the world. I just thought it was especially odd, all things considered. Otherwise, though, this game ran flawlessly for me. Genuinely no issues. I have not seen a single report of anybody having any problems in that regard. And while I'm sure they do certainly exist for someone, this game does mostly seem to be running pretty well. Now, before we dive into the story, probably worth a mention that the game does, technically speaking, have a difficulty option of normal or hard. I would personally say this is not the type of game that is trying to be exceptionally difficult, and thus this is not probably an important choice for the vast majority of people, but I would say the biggest difference between them at the same time, though, is that on hard mode, you're likely going to have to make more use of the demon fusion mechanic, which we'll get into here in a bit. From there, let's talk about the story setup and my thoughts on it. So I'm a little mixed on the story overall, to be honest. And that is because while it touches on a lot of fun subjects, goes to some surprisingly dark places at the same time, that is a little bit juxtaposed against the fact that a lot of times these kids, who are supposed to be like 12 and 10 respectively, talk in a way that I don't think really suits their age, which is largely down to the fact that this is not written by 12-year-olds. So it winds up just feeling a little bit weird, I guess, overall, in terms of like the specific things they say sometimes. So that's probably worth knowing up front. But as I've already mentioned, we are 2 kids who get stuck living with their grandfather for the summer because their parents are getting divorced. And while we are certainly going to spend that summer running around town, doing odd jobs, taking part in activities, the broader story is largely about these demons, because the town just so happens to be infested with demons who are abducting children, and our job is to save them. But we're not doing that by ourselves. We've actually been having nightmares, our main character Emily, that is, and it turns out she's being given these nightmares by none other than Lucifer. Lucifer offers you a deal. Power in exchange for dealing with these demons who have somehow trapped him on this plane at the same time. In exchange for giving you access to guardian spirits who are going to augment your abilities and make you a formidable enough opponent to fight these demons, he's going to be freed, is ultimately what it comes down to. And you, your brother Chester, your friend Ramona, who you meet pretty early on, and your talking dog Hugo that you meet, are going to be the primary people driving that particular situation forward, largely by making your way through various dungeons, tackling these bosses, and getting them to stop abducting all these children, of course. Now, it's kind of that part that winds up being the most interesting, though, because there are, I would say, 3 primary scenarios of the demon hunting aspect of it. There is a bit of an in-game, depending on the choices you make, mind you, so there is a little bit more of it, but in each and every one of those, you basically find out why kids are being abducted, what dark situation led to this, and we've got everything from child abuse, kids being taken away by the state, PTSD, and veterans. So while I can appreciate that this game absolutely has a very sort of cutesy art style that honestly I enjoy, just be advised that that art style is not necessarily indicative of what is going to happen content-wise. Keeping it moving though, let's next up talk about progression. This is an RPG after all, and our kids here will in fact be getting stronger over the course of the story. So the first thing I want to mention here is actually attributes, or sort of like skills that will give you bonuses to dice rolls that occasionally happen in conversation. Basically, you've got 4 of these, things like smarts, guts, proficiency, and increasing these from 1 to 9 gives you a bigger bonus in those dice rolls that I mentioned. These are honestly pretty easy to level up once you know how, and you get a few starting stats in these, but it's not a huge deal. Because while a couple of these dice rolls, will actually lock you off from some content if you fail them, for the most part it's not that make or break. Otherwise though, we've got our levels. As we defeat enemies and everything, we will be gaining levels, which increases your stats passively, but what's more, your guardian spirits also level up alongside your characters. This means that their stats increase, which makes their spells that they grant you stronger. That's an important distinction because your melee damage is purely from whatever melee weapon you have equipped. Whereas stats and things will actually do things like reduce damage, make you more likely to avoid an attack, that kind of stuff. Damage scaling works a little bit differently. The other part of that though is the demons. So you have your set guardian spirit for each character. You can, however, capture the demons you're going to be fighting, and it's a little obtuse. We'll talk about it in the combat section. But basically, you can catch demons and you can combine them together to get stronger versions of those demons, and you can attach 1 demon per character in addition to their guardian spirit, which will give them extra stats and combat approaches via things like spells and stuff that you'll get to use because you have that demon associated with you. The problem I have with this system in this game is that it's actually really hard to catch these demons until you get to the end of the game, where you're likely to need it a lot less. It's fine for what it is, but it feels a little half-baked in the end, in my opinion. We'll talk more about this in combat, like I mentioned, though. Then we've got gear. So there is a bunch of equipment to attach to each individual character. The other catch here, though, is that because there is no time limit or anything, and you get access to the shop, or like the big one that you'll buy the best stuff from right away in Act 1, basically means that once you get access to the ability to work a job, you can spend like every day working a double shift at this store until you have enough money to upgrade everybody's equipment to the max right before you even start doing like the main dungeons and stuff, which pretty much guarantees you can go through the entire game barely even worrying about that demon fusion because you'll be equipped to the gills and nothing will really be able to hurt you. You don't have to play like that, to be clear. I'm just saying that there are a few problems with progression overall. The last thing for progression I want to mention is actually the friendship levels. So all of our characters that can come with us, Chester, Ramona, Hugo, and another girl, Ruth, you'll meet who can support your team, they have little side quests associated with them. And if you do them and spend that time with those characters, they will actually get bonuses to combat. Ruth, who is not actually a combat participant, her levels in this friendship will actually just give you passive bonuses to the entire team. Whereas the bonuses to the combat characters tend to be a little more specific, like for instance, Chester gets a chance to just straight up kill non-boss, non-elite enemies, regardless of the damage his attacks deal, and then he also gets an extra chance to apply status effects to the enemy. Little things like that. Basically, spend time with these people and they will get more powerful, which is as good a place as any to talk about the gameplay and world of this one. The game is divided up into 3 acts, basically, and these acts determine how much of the town you can access. So, starting in Act 1, you're pretty limited, and then you get access to other zones in Act 2 and Act 3, and some of the quests are hidden behind that mechanic, which means that there is some progression for your friends that you cannot do until that is done. But otherwise, gameplay largely comes down to either exploring the town and engaging in activities, or being more combat focused and trying to deal with the dungeons that are plaguing this particular act of the game you happen to be in. Dungeons are pretty straightforward. We're going to run around, fight enemies in combat, maybe solve a couple puzzles or do some extra stuff. Main quest-wise, you occasionally have to exit dungeons, so they're not like a single one-and-done type of deal. You may conquer them over the course of several days, and in some cases, because of the quest associated with them, that's actually required. But dungeons are mostly a combat affair, and so the thing I want to talk about here is actually primarily the side quests and the activities. For starters, a lot of the side quests are a lot of fun, and they give you kind of insight on the residents of the town. For instance, there are 2 witches who can send you to investigate a pet cemetery. There is a guy on the farm map who is very obviously an alien that has taken over somebody's body. There is honestly a potentially very dark side quest involving him and his brother. And those were just a couple of my favorites, but there's a whole host of side quests involving these various denizens of Bloomtown, and I personally would say that's probably where some of the best content of this game actually is. Now, outside of just that, there is a lot of other stuff to do as well. You can work a job, like I mentioned, which is a great way to earn money. You can also fish, which is going to give you the fish you need for doing things like crafting via cooking, or say mechanical scrap to make gadgets to use in combat or pick locks. You can hang out with your friends, you can shop at various places, you can do all of these clubs. You can also find just various interactables, which will usually increase those skills I mentioned. Like, for instance, you can solve crossword puzzles to increase your smarts. You can have it out with a swan that lives in the park to increase your guts, that kind of thing. And there's even some puzzles that will eventually lead to rewards like loot and whatnot. So exploring the town really is a fun part of this game if you lean fully into it. You can even use the telephone at your grandfather's to prank call the museum, which also leads to 2 separate side quests. Now, I don't want to oversell it. It is, again, a relatively small game, but exploring the town and enjoying those activities is a lot of what this game has to offer, and I would not recommend ignoring it. That does bring us to combat, though. So, combat is a relatively simple affair that is, because of the nature of this game and the ability to grind out gear and the like to trivialize it even farther, just not a terribly difficult thing to do, unless you're trying to rush forward without doing any of that prep. Otherwise, though, combat is a team turn-based affair. Your team will go and then the enemy team will go. And on your turn, you basically have the option of either using a melee attack, a spell, a ranged attack, an item, that kind of thing. Melee is pretty straightforward. Damage is determined by the melee weapon you have equipped and nothing else really. Some weapons have the ability to apply status effects at the cost of dealing less damage overall, that kind of thing. So there is a little bit of trade-off there, but not much. Spells are determined by the demons and your individual guardian spirits. As you level up, they get more abilities and things as they go, which is important because they are how you are going to primarily apply your various status effects to enemies. Status effects are really important in this game because they actually kind of play off of each other, meaning that hitting an enemy that has a status effect with a specific type of attack or element will actually lead to a combo which will deal more damage. So if you want to do well in combat, you really need to hone in on that. Now that does come with a couple of issues because honestly you're probably just going to miss a lot because of the way this game handles evasion and the like, and the fact that certain spells actually have a reduced chance to hit, especially if they are trying to hit all of the enemies you're hitting, and as such missing a lot, and then also having a system that relies on status effects to apply your combos and deal increased damage is a little bit of a problem. It doesn't feel quite polished, frankly. And I think they definitely could have done some more work there. Something you also have to keep in mind, though, is that you cannot attack the backline of demons with, like, say, melee attacks, because they are blocked by the demons in front, which means if you want to hit the backline, you have to use your ranged attacks. A huge strategy in combat, however, is honestly just trying to steal turns from the enemy before they can do it to you, and using weapons or effects that can take turns from an enemy, like freezing them, turning them against their enemies, or just stunning them outright, that kind of thing. But the last thing I wanted to talk about is a little bit about that demon capture mechanic. So the reason this is annoying and not very fun to deal with is that in order to capture a demon, you have to down them. And not just them, you either have to kill every other demon on the field or also down them. The way you down a demon is typically just by hitting them with an elemental attack that actually deals damage. That's important, some of them only deal status effects, but damage that they are weak to specifically. That has a chance to down them, and this will, of course, make them available for capture once you've dealt with the rest of the demons on the field, though they recover every turn, so even that is not a guarantee. You then roll a skill check based on your charm stat in order to actually try to capture these demons. There's also an item you can get that basically makes this a guarantee, so it's not the only option, but just be aware. Now, if that wasn't enough of a problem, the other issue you have is that most of your guardian spirits don't give you spells that actually deal direct elemental damage until you gain a few levels. And even then, it's probably not going to be the spells you need right away, which means I wasn't able to reliably capture demons for fusion until pretty close to the end of the game, like Act 3 into the final portion. And that means you spend a great deal of this game not engaging really at all with what is at least implied to be a major mechanic in how you're supposed to power these guys up. And it is just, again, one of those places where I really do feel like the game could have used a bit more polish that it just unfortunately does not have, which is probably my single biggest criticism. But either way, that's pretty much it for combat, so we are moving on to Steam Deck. This game is, of course, verified for the Steam Deck. No surprises there. This type of game tends to play very well on that platform. It's short and sweet, lends itself very well to a controller. There is absolutely no reason at all you could not play this on that platform. Nothing really much else to say. This kind of stuff is just perfect for something like the Steam Deck. Moving on to positives and negatives though, then we'll wrap this thing up on the positive side of things. So for me, a huge positive was the art, the aesthetics of it. I love the way they handled the pixel art. I enjoy that they managed to incorporate, days and like a schedule to the town to make it feel more alive while not at the same time introducing any time pressure, because this is clearly meant to be like a laid-back summer adventure, which is why I was playing it. Add on top of that a bunch of really great side quests, main quests that were interesting, and I think you've got a winner, even if some of the writing feels a little strange in places. Now, on the negative side, it's mostly just the stuff that feels half-baked. The fact that demon fusion is really hard as a mechanic to use throughout much of the game because of the natural progression that is presented to you. A lot of the attributes that the game makes those dice rolls with don't feel especially thought out. You can grind them anyway if it means that much to you. And then, like I said, progression can largely be just completely outpaced in the very first act, and I think just an easy way to handle that would be to spread out different shops into the different acts of the game that prevent access to the best stuff immediately, to add a bit of a progression curve. And in that way, I think there's a lot of stuff this game could have touched up to make that overall combat flow and experience better and more interesting, and to my mind that's this game's biggest missed opportunity. But that does bring us to our conclusion, and luckily for everybody, this game is cheap. At a base price, it comes in at $25 US, but the catch there is it already is on sale pretty regularly for usually like half off. I personally picked it up for, I think it was like $10. And while I would be happy to pay $25 for it, because I think this is easily worth that amount of money, you can get it for even cheaper if that matters to you. And for that price, I think you're getting a fun adventure that doesn't overstay its welcome, but unfortunately does have some mechanics that just don't feel super well put together, and could have used an extra layer of polish and a little more time in the oven, if we're being honest. And so while I wouldn't consider Bloomtown to be like, some super masterpiece of the genre that is an absolute must play, it's a lot of fun to play, and again, I think it's kind of like the perfect game to play in the summer, given the nature and context of the story itself. And all of that combined still makes it an easy enough game to recommend, which is obviously what we're doing here, which is why I'm giving it a buy. So that's pretty much everything I've got to say about Bloomtown, A Different Story. Certainly hope you enjoyed the review. If you did, by all means, like, comment, subscribe, all the YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.